Super excited to have everyone here. Thank you for making the time to be here. I'm always so impressed and just grateful for how engaged and active this community is. It's just wonderful to have these meetings time and time again. If you haven't, I'll give a little speech now. Would be awesome if you could connect your data on the Kindred platform if you are enrolled in the Listen Study, which you all are if you are here. Connecting your data is imperative for the research that they're doing. If you have any concern about safety with your data or anything like that, we actually had a K-Talk about a few weeks ago with Jay Ward, who is an expert in the field. So you can check out Kindred's YouTube page. If you don't know where to find that, you can shoot me an email, talia@hugo.health, and I'll send you that link. If you have any questions about connecting your data, you can also reach out to me, but I highly recommend that you do that. And really, that's all that I have to say. Without any further ado, I'd love to turn this over to the Listen team. They'll introduce yourself and get right into it. So welcome again, and thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Harlan Krumholtz. Many of you may have met me before. I'm a cardiologist. I'm a faculty member at Yale and one of the people who's involved with the Listen Study, and so appreciative for all of your participation. What we thought we'd do is, usually I'm here with Akiko and the rest of the team. Akiko couldn't make it today, but we really wanted to have a meeting where we could get together and engage with folks and exchange some information and hear from the people who are participating. So we wanted to just push ahead and have this. We'll continue to have these over time. So, and I believe we'll be having more and more information to share from the study. But the first thing before we get started is we'll just go through and let folks introduce themselves. So in case you haven't met everyone, and actually we have a new member of the team too. So Tiana, why don't you go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiana. I'm a medical student at Yale helping out on the project.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mitsu. I'm a cardiologist and a clinician scientist working at Yale as a researcher now. I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Lindsay McAlpine. I'm a neurologist at Yale, and I am part of the COVID Mind Study and run the neuro-COVID clinic at Yale.
And you all may not have met Tiana and Lindsay before. They've more recently joined. And we're thrilled to have Tiana and we're thrilled to have Lindsay. Lindsay's got depth of experience taking care of people with long COVID and is really an expert in neuropathies and autoimmune disease and a whole range of issues that I think are really relevant to this community. And we're really, really happy that she's been able to join us. Bornali Bhattacharjee is also going to join us. She is from Akiko's lab. Many of you may have met her before. She's amazing, terrific. Some reasons having trouble getting into the webinar, and we're working on that and see if we can get her in. But you'll see her soon, and she'll be able to field questions about what's going on in the lab. So I just wanted to take maybe 15 minutes just to hit on some high points about what we're doing in the Listen Study and to sort of bring you up to date. And then we're just going to open it up for discussions and questions. And, you know, we sort of have this format where we use the chat. We found that to be kind of effective. Honestly, it would be really great if we could actually see folks and do a little differently. We can play with this in future webinars to kind of think what might be, how to optimize this for everyone. But for now, we're going to continue on the kind of pattern that we're using for this. So this call is a research call. It's about the Listen Study. So just to say, in terms of setting expectations, that we're not going to talk about clinical treatments or focus or dig into clinical questions. That's what Kindred Cafe or other venues might be more appropriate for that. We really want to focus on the issues around the research. And so let me just again tell you about the general approach with Listen. The idea was to bring together a bunch of people in partnership, to have people self-report information about themselves, to let us know about how they're feeling and what their life is like in structured questionnaires or these surveys, but also good information about when they were infected, what kind of vaccines they had, and so forth. And again, this study is for people with long COVID, in addition, people with vaccine injury, and we're kind of trying to be able to create a joint database that captures people's experience, in addition to be able to people to connect their records, and for some people to get biospecimen collection. Among the data that's being collected within Listen, we're doing sort of a characterization of the population, descriptive studies that are really providing some insight into what people are experiencing. And there's lots of questions we may want to ask about this. I'll get into that as we go on. But also, we're going to be looking at, you all have provided information about yourselves in stories. Plus, we're thinking of embarking on some individual interviews to be able to do sort of a qualitative component to this as well. And then the laboratory, which is sort of a sub-study, just we wish we could do laboratory evaluations of everyone, so we could include it in the study, but they're resource intensive. We're sending people to people's homes to collect the blood and saliva. So, at this point, we're only able to do it on a few people relative to the entire group of people who are enrolled. So, but that's the other part, to be able to characterize with the immunophenotyping with sort of thousands of measures of the immune system to develop what we're calling sort of immune signatures, these sort of characterizations of immune system function through the antibodies and cytokines and chemokines and cell receptors. And then ultimately what we want to do is take our characterizations of how people are feeling and what their symptoms are with what's coming up in the lab, and see if there's how does that overlay the clusters of different folks who have different characterizations of how they feel, different kind of symptom clusters, and how do they exhibit within the lab. So some of you have heard this before, but I'm just trying to level set for the group. And then our areas of emphasis are overall we're looking at long COVID and vaccine injury, but also within these groups we're digging a little bit deeper into some of the subgroups that seem to be highly represented within the groups. And for example, that would be the tremors and internal vibrations, or a lot of people with tinnitus, a lot of people with POTS. So we're going to be trying to look and see, particularly at very prominent symptom groups, but we're also looking at how those cluster with other symptoms as well. And the issue is sort of like, people want to talk about these conditions globally, but within the conditions, it's probably a misunderstanding to think of this as sort of one thing, either long COVID or one thing, vaccine injury. But in fact, there are different subpopulations that are exhibiting, they're very similar among themselves, but maybe very different from other people. And so we're going to try to really characterize that. And then there are issues of timing, when did people get the symptoms? How long have they lasted? Did they come and go? Are they persistent? What kind of trajectories are there? And then also within the different vaccines or within the different variants, are people manifesting the same or different? And then how about different other subgroups, men and women, people who had some prior certain kinds of conditions versus people who didn't? I mean, we're really trying to understand this in the best way we can and characterize it. Let me just give you a sense of Listen so far. So there are 1,500 people who have joined Listen. And within that group, we have almost 600 who are long COVID only. We have about 350 who report both long COVID and vaccine injury, and about 350, a little bit more, who say vaccine injury only. Within this group, like I said, 1,500 overall, 3/4 of the group report as female, and 23% report as male, 1.3% report as non-binary. Within this group, 84% self-report as white. And then, we have a range of others, although I think we have the sense that we need to think hard about how we can be as inclusive as possible. We think that there are probably a lot of people where they're still not reaching, and if we could improve the diversity of the group, it would help us with its representativeness and generalizability. So any ideas you guys have about that, what we can be doing to reach, to get a more diverse group, that would be great. 87% of listen is from the United States. So it's mostly from the US, but interestingly, we do have, good representation from around the world as well. And one thing you may be interested in is that, by and large, the listen community is a group that's highly affected by the conditions that they have. And so on that 0 to 100 scale, the mean is 51. So if you look in the United States, or if you look at our group that, by the way, the number should be about 80 or 82. That is just an average across the United States. We have 214 people who joined as controls. That is, they don't have long COVID or vaccine injury. We need this for reference populations. And interestingly, remember I told you in the United States, if you go to that Euro quality of life visual analog scale, that's what it's called, that 0 to 100 scale. In the US, the normative value of folks in the US, something like 82, 84. And that's because, of course, people don't have perfect health if you go out in the population. But in our control group, it's 80. So actually our control group, that's good. Our control group looks very much like what you might expect from that in the US. We've been thinking, how do we get more controls? How do we get that in? Well, who would be good controls? And one of the things we thought was, especially for the people who are giving the biospecimens, because we're getting biospecimens from controls also, is asking people who are participating if they can maybe identify someone who's in their demographic, who's around them, either related to them or in their network, locally in their neighborhoods, or friends or family who might be willing to participate, who are kind of around their same age and maybe same sex, that maybe we can enlist you to help us find controls, because the faster and better we can find controls who are like you, the better off we're going to be. So any help that you can give us on that. And Bornali, thank you for joining us. I saw you're on now, though I see somehow you're on Leslie's name, but I'm glad we got a link for you to join. You want to say hi?
Hello, sorry, I couldn't get in, and Leslie helped me to get in. Thank you, Leslie. So that was very helpful. Yeah.
Oh, good. So if you look at health status, it looks like there are about 30% of people overall in Listen who report excellent or very good health. But most folks are, it's like half of them are fair or poor. And that's no surprise to many of you, I know, because, that's how you feel. But I think it's also important, one, that we're sensitive to the struggles people have, but also gives us as researchers, I think, even greater imperative that we work hard to try to get answers, because, there's so many people in our group who are really, really suffering. I mean, we know that, we hear the stories, but, and it's reflected in this. Of course, if you look at if you look at the people reporting long COVID, about 1 in 4 do report very good or excellent health, but most people are not reporting that at all. We have 60-70% who are reporting not very good at all. And of course, the control population is skewed towards good health, as you might expect. And that's what we want. We want that because they're the comparison group. I want to just emphasize again, as this whole program, we're working to be as much as participant-centric as possible. We want to listen to you. We want to hear your ideas. We want to make this study convenient for you. We want to return results as much as possible. And then we're also very committed, of course, as soon as we learn things and listen, we're going to post a preprint, and we want to have town halls so we can explain to you what we found and get your feedback too about what you think about it. With the lab, we're working with the IRB, the regulatory oversight of the study, to figure out, for those who do have biospecimen collections, what can we return and how can we get that back to people, as so that they get at least some information about those tests that are being done. There's some negotiation on our part, because the IRB is worried about us giving back non-clinical tests, because they don't want people acting on the tests that are all research tests. On the other hand, we know people are hungry for any information about their bodies and what's going on. So we're sort of fighting to figure out as much as we can give back. We're going to give back. We're in the midst of that. I'll also ask for this, like on the chat. If anyone is in this group who's reporting long COVID and vaccine injury, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about like what led you to report both. I mean, did one occur before the other? Did like the vaccine exacerbate long COVID? Or like we're trying to understand what that means exactly, because there are a lot of people who have, like I said, 350 people who've reported that they're both, and you know, we're just trying to figure out a little bit about like, well, what is that an entirely separate group? I think TJF, you would write it, or ultimately, like I think maybe we might even should maybe call people and try to understand, or if you can write it, you can write it here. You can also email us. And what is it? listenstudy@yale.edu. Isn't that right, Mitsu? I think it's listenstudy@yale.edu. We'll pull everything down from the chat also, but I'm just giving you an example why we want to interact with folks, because there's like some things that we're trying to puzzle. So Catherine, when you say you have long COVID and vaccine injury, you know, it's like, what can, and again, you could do it in chat, you could do it in email. It's like, what does that mean exactly? Because, you know, why are you saying that you have that? How are you disentangling them and so forth? Because you had long COVID and then you also had something entirely different, or it exacerbated what you had. That's what we're trying to get a sense from folks about what that means and how we should probably handle it within the study. We're thinking hard about that, and also open to any suggestions. I'm just going to say that I know we haven't been going as fast as we wish we could. Funding has been an issue. We're out looking for funding. We're trying to strengthen our ability to move faster and better. But let me just say we are fully committed, particularly through the next, like now, like we feel like we're getting enough data in that we should be producing insights and putting stuff up and getting it out. And we're strongly committed to this. And we know that many of you are frustrated. Many of you are finding it hard, both because of your symptoms and because of the reception within the medical care environment. We don't think enough people are doing research in this area. And we want to be good partners in this and see what we can do to push things forward with you. We're also in the process of continuing to revise and refine the kinds of questions we're asking. We're going to ask more questions of the controls, try to improve that, but we're also all ears as you may make suggestions to us about the things we want to do. You know, we want to be open to research questions that you guys have. So you may be wondering about something, and we can be an engine for that. We can see whether or not we can put together a quick questionnaire, send it out, learn together, post the result. I mean, there are ways that we can work together. And, Teresa's on, I saw it today, and she's already like helping us to think about people who've got this sort of tremors and internal vibrations. Like I said, we're going to be bringing together groups with specific symptom clusters so that we can work together and try to advance the ball. But we want to be, if there are those of you who really want to be involved, let us know, because, again, we're still learning. We're going to make mistakes. We got to figure out how to do this well. But, we're looking for you to hear also about your interest, and we want to be respectful of also what you want to do in the time that you have. So the last thing I want to say is some of you have seen that Kindred posted this issue about there is a reporter, actually let's call her a writer more than a reporter, who is a physician, a geriatrician, actually, I think a remarkably talented individual who also writes for the New Yorker. She wants to do a story on Listen, and she's talked to a bunch of people in Listen already. And I just talked to her yesterday, and she was just saying, I'm so glad to hear that, Emily. So you spoke with her and it was a good experience. Doesn't she have like an amazing manner about her? She also, by the way, put me at ease when I talked to her. And anyway, I'm hopeful that it'll give some good attention, and not just to the study, but to the lives you guys are leading, the challenges you're facing, and maybe help people understand, you know, the legitimacy of what you've got, because as we still know, there's still people out there who are doubting what's going on. And we know, you know, we know for sure that there are a lot of people suffering. And I think that and Nicole, I just think she got a lot of notes from folks, and that's great that you wrote her. You can write her again. She's really nice. I don't know how many she'll stop at. You know, it was a really good response from listen participants, and maybe she's getting to a point where she wants to do, but I don't feel that, you know, I think it's great for people who've given time. Don't feel bad if she didn't get back to you, because I think it was just a lot of folks, but that was so nice of you to volunteer and to offer. So can you guys
Yeah.
make a handout that we can give out to doctors explaining long COVID and how exercise makes us worse? Just something simple. So TJ, I think I want to just sort of push by the way, I think it's great to think about like how we can build resources and what can happen, but I want to sort of push that into Kindred a little bit, just because I think Kindred's thinking about like how to build resources and what can happen. I'm very sympathetic to that, and I think it's really important. But I just want to, for the purposes of this session, the focus on that, but I don't want to lose it. So Talia's of course here, so she can see that, and we can talk about how we can convene a group. With regard to the exercise stuff, you know, there's some stuff that's settled science. I was just wondering also whether we ought to incorporate some sort of substudy about how do people react to physical exertion, and what does that just mean? But when you say people believe us, I think I'm happy to say whatever, to say people need to believe you guys, because you're living, you have so much wisdom about what it's like to be living with these conditions. I would love opportunity to talk with Lindsay. Somebody said so. I know, you want to answer that now?
Yeah, so you just have your primary or another physician put in a referral to Yale Neurology and just say post-COVID clinic.
Is there a link, or how do they find that? And by the way, you don't have to do that now. Maybe you can give
Yeah,
it.
I'll put a fax, like our fax number in. That's
Okay.
makes it a little more accessible.
Go
I
ahead.
cannot see anybody out of state. So that's, you have to be in Connecticut or in New York until, actually that might have already expired in New York. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it hasn't expired in New York yet.
It hasn't, the telemedicine, okay.
No. Maybe there's some time, like even on the Kindred side, that you can talk about your experience as a clinician, and if you're willing, Lindsay, I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Absolutely,
But
absolutely.
we could, I mean, again, like in the interest of sort of taking that kind of content on the other side, that could be like a Kindred Cafe, Talia, that she can talk about those issues. I think that would be great. So, Katie, you're just saying in lieu of sharing our records, an alternative would be self-reporting diagnoses, tests done, and so on, would be more accessible for folks tech-wise and privacy-wise. So first of all, thank you. Then you say, I remember when I filled out Listen, it had limited options and not, maybe you're saying not complete symptoms and diagnoses, et cetera. And appreciate your thank you. We thank you, really, honestly. So I think there's a couple things here. One is, you know, we were trying to find balance. By the way, we worked with many of you. When I say you, participants, people were part of Listen, as we tried to construct these surveys, and we're trying to balance like what was reasonable. In fact, the reason they were segmented, and we were doing this on the Hugo Kindred side, the reason they were segmented because folks said that it was just overwhelming to try to do this in a single questionnaire. But you know, we have a lot of symptoms. I think there's like 100 symptoms and a lot of conditions, and a lot of people gave us feedback like, you know, that's a lot of work to answer all these questions. And honestly, we probably would have wanted even more, you know, because we're hearing from you all about the wide range of things you're experiencing. We want to fully capture all of it. So we were kind of in a pickle, you know, it's like, do we do more? Do we do less? And so that's, you know, we need to be thinking about like how to do this best. And then the thing about the medical records means that, you know, Hugo has policies that, you know, no data moves without your permission, nothing goes off Hugo, nothing's sold, nothing. You know, many places de-identify, health systems give your data to other companies that de-identify and sell it. Hugo doesn't do that. You know, people are uncomfortable. They shouldn't share their data, that's fine. They're, you know, on the listen side, when we get it, we also, because we're overseen by the IRB, by Yale, you know, we don't do anything else with the data except what we're permitted to. The medical records sort of complement what people self-report. So that's why we do it this way. But there still will be some people, no matter what, who feel uncomfortable about it, but are still willing to do self-report. So we're happy to have whatever people are willing to share. But we're trying to build this. So again, participant-centric, nothing happens to your data except what's explicitly, you know, permitted and so forth. And that's what we do. As part of the study, we would like to de-identify the data and share it with other investigators, only for the purposes of research. And, you know, probably we should have a town hall to talk about that. But I think I'm a big believer in open science, and I want to be able to get a sort of force multiplier effect of any data that's available. We need to make sure it's fully de-identified so that it's safe and secure. I kind of want to pull treatments into the kindred side, but there is a question about whether we should be trying to understand treatments. One of the things we thought was that we could do a descriptive paper that focuses on people's experience and their symptoms and the timing and so forth. And then another paper, and these are just quick hits just so people can see and know, like sort of organize the data about the kind of treatments people are getting. And it's hard in this context to know what works or what doesn't work because of how everyone's trying a lot of different things at once, and people's symptoms are coming and going. But at least it may be helpful to kind of see what were people perceiving about that and what people are trying. The question was really, are we keeping track of supplements, which we are being reported by people, but whether or not they're producing positive results ends up being a difficult thing to infer from this design.
It's hard because I feel like the time course of long COVID without any treatment, it has its own time course, right? People generally improve over time, very, very, very slowly, but then adding in treatments or life stressors, it's hard to control and know it. And I don't think there's any supplements off the top of my head that are like a must-have, must-take, slam dunk. You know, I think it's different for everyone, because I know that, like you were saying, we're going to find out that there's not one cause of long COVID. Depending on the constellation of symptoms, people are going to have different mechanisms and causes. And so that means different supplements, treatments.
So Joe asked about how would I get a test for someone who got the vaccine but wasn't affected. And I guess also this gets to like, what kind of controls do we want? Look, I think we're happy to get somebody who's like you. I mean, first of all, if you got somebody who got the same lot who wasn't affected, that's like nirvana. Like that's amazing. Like especially if that person's near your age and sex, like that's a really great control. But I think it's going to be hard. I mean, ideally, and look, almost everyone in the country's been infected by COVID at this point. Some people got long COVID, some people don't. If someone with long COVID, like when we're going to look for controls, we're going to look for someone as similar to you as possible. I think it's hard to match someone who got infected just when you got infected, but we're just looking otherwise, basically for someone who doesn't have long COVID, who's in your demographic. Same vaccine injury, someone who got vaccinated but didn't get vaccine injury and is close to your demographic as possible. I don't know, Bornell, if you want to say something about your thinking about that. And then let me just say there are two issues here. One is for the lab controls, but we're also interested for broadly in listen. So anyone who can help us by like just having people join as controls, that's fantastic. And then people who particularly have biospecimens taken, we're probably going to go to those people directly and really try to get to see whether we can get someone who matches, because for those people, we're going to go out and collect the biospecimens. But you want to say anything about that, Bernali?
Yeah, we have been trying to match the vaccines as well. And at the same time, different parameters and different surveys that have been taken are also being analyzed.
Please.
Okay, thank you. So first off, we already have samples from 85 participants. Thank you for that. And thank you for bearing with the delays in sending out the phlebotomists. That's always a problem because we have to find a perfect phlebotomist at the right time and according to the area. So this has been the problem. And at the same time, we are also trying to prioritize some samples, as Harlan has mentioned, to gauge what is exactly happening. There were two questions regarding autoantibodies, which I thought we could answer. So the first question that came was asking about the signs of autoantibody detection. So usually antibodies are to defend us against anything that's external, pathogens per se, but autoantibodies are antibodies that attack our own proteins. So that's why we say autoantibodies. There was this question, is there a need to know the target autoantigen before you can search for its corresponding autoantibody? Yes. So in the preprint that we have published on long COVID, we are looking at 6,000 extracellular and secreted proteins. But you should also see from the data that we have generated and the analysis that has been done so far, what we see is that we do not see much patterns with, say, ACE2 receptors that has been questioned. So we had a question as to whether we are looking at ACE2 autoantibodies. Yes, we have looked at ACE2 autoantibodies, and after 1 year of acute COVID, those who are saying that they have long COVID, in our data set, we have not found reactivity to ACE2 receptors. But at the same time, if you look at what kind of clinical tests are done in order to look for autoantibodies in anybody suffering from autoimmune diseases, you'll observe that many of them are nuclear proteins and RNA-bound proteins that are looked at. So we haven't looked at those, so we cannot definitively say that they are not, there are no antibodies against those. So it is no antibody detection for a subset, but there are certain receptor proteins that we see have higher reactivities in long COVID. So we are running the assay, some of the assays real time actually. So for all the samples that have been collected so far, we have been able to run the microclot assays. A part of it, there are two parts to the assays, and one part is to be done immediately after receiving the sample. Those are being done. The rest of them are being stored to finish the assays. Yeah, so we have done them.
Somebody asked if we accept scanned PDF results from labs done overseas with that.
Yes, so this question has come up a few times in the chat, and absolutely we have, you can upload individual documents using the Hugo Connect tool. So the same way that you would connect your data, you just go on in, I think it's the last option in the little pop-up. So it's going to say upload individual documents. And you just kind of upload it like you would upload an individual PDF on any other website. I'll link a tutorial on how to do that right now in the chat, so look out for that. And if you do run into any issues, you can always contact our support team at support@hugo.health. So the answer is yes.
Somebody, Paul was just asking this global question about the research. I mean, I don't know if you were there at the beginning, Paul, but I was just sort of, talking about, like, I think our job, there's so little known about this. And I know there are others who've done survey and published about this, but, we're going to try to take as many people who have finished out the surveys, characterize those groups, also try to understand what clusters exist within them. Tiana's going to be doing some qualitative research to try to get all of your voices out there. I mean, part of this is raising awareness, helping to educate people on what the experiences of people, how many different groups are there under these umbrella terms, and then work really hard to see whether or not the insights from the lab can help us to understand some of the mechanisms so that it can accelerate our progress towards diagnostics and therapeutics. Teresa's helping with this, and we hope to bring together a large group of you who have this and be able to, like, both exchange information to be able to help characterize it better. I think this is also, like, will be, and Lindsay, I'm hoping that your clinical insights will be important here too. and try to figure out how we can make some progress. We want to do this for all of the areas, but this one in particular, I think there's a lot of people who are talking about this, you can't see it, but people feel it. And so many people are describing it in a very similar way, like not people who got together and shared shared experiences yet, but like never met each other, and they're saying the same thing. So, we want to try to illuminate this as much as possible. Do you want to say anything about that, Lindsay?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, internal vibrations have been linked to other conditions before COVID. So like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or Parkinson's, some other conditions. And so, one of my suspicions is that it's the very small nerve fibers that are misfiring and damaged in these conditions and maybe leading to this feeling of vibration. So, yet to be proven, but there's some interesting supporting evidence, and we've seen quite a bit of small fiber neuropathy in long COVID, which I've published on before too.
That's terrific. Do we have plans on conduct trials of immunomodulating drugs? So I think the thing about this Paxlovid trial, which by the way was slowed because there's some mechanics about it, trying to get it up at Yale. But I think that when we've worked out all the kinks, it'll be more straightforward for us if we have the opportunity to do others. And I mean, at least it's my hope that we can start being in a position so that we can rapidly run through trials. We're going to have to figure out the funding mechanisms and how that works. But if we can work synergistically with Kindred and listen and be able to rapidly enroll and get rapid answers about whether people are feeling better, like that would be amazing. And that's the dream about this. So, but right now, I think we're all on that PAX-LC trial. We're all hands on deck to get it stood up, just to say for that. Probably we hope that we'll randomize people by beginning of July at the latest. And then because of the way that it's working, that people are funneling through Kindred, we're hoping for really rapid enrollment. And one of the things we're trying to figure out how we expand. Right now it's Connecticut, New York, and Florida for the same reasons that Lindsay was talking about. I know Lindsay, by the way, it's really easy to get a telemedicine in Florida. It takes just a couple days, but anyway, I'll tell you about that. But
really? That would be good, actually, because we have a lot of snowbirds. Yeah.
And actually what Connecticut's trying to pass a law through the legislature. So for one application, we could get privileges in 37 states. So I think the future may be that we have the ability to have on our trials to be able to more easily do larger numbers of states, and for even clinically, the problem is there's only one Lindsay, but we have to figure out like how that's going to work and what we can do to help serve the need. I don't think there are enough studies being done for these conditions. And that's one of the principal problems, is that, there's not enough and they're not moving fast enough. And you could say that about us too. But yeah, I mean, that's an issue.
The best specialists to see if they have POTS?
Yeah, again, I think, what I was thinking is even on the Kindred side, that maybe we should have some cafes that are specifically focused in particular areas. And in those areas, we can actually see if there are people. Again, we don't want to endorse anyone, but we might be able to help talk about where there are centers that are focusing on that. I actually want to do some work in listen on POTS as well. And I've talked to the American College of Cardiology about partnering with us on this, and also being a resource to identify which cardiologists are welcoming patients, understand that this is real, want to be, have some ability to help people, and interest in caring for these patients. As you know, there are pockets within our healthcare system where people don't feel welcome, right? Because these are hard. We're early in the knowledge. Doctors feel inadequate, and the visits don't go quickly because people have got a lot of issues. And so we want to know who does want to see these people, you people, and how can we help with that? So You know, I think that would be good to think about on the Kindred side about how we can bring people like Erica Spatz, I'm sure would be interested and willing to be part of one. And we can bring in some people from college cardiology too. And you know, try to bring in resources this way, because I know people are really eager to know where to look and what they can trust. And again, people are running their own experiments all the time, because you just can't sit around and wait when you're suffering. You want to try things, but you don't want to disadvantage yourself either by the potential to make things worse. So that's the issue. They're asking about lactic acid levels. So Bernali, I can't remember if that's one of the things that's being measured.
No, lactic acid we haven't at least measured in the preprint that we have in collaboration with Mount Sinai.
I think some of the issues too have to do with what can be done with the way that the specimens are collected and processed. So, but we can look into that.
Yes. So yesterday we were at a meeting. We were talking to a person who is an expert in metabolomics. So the first step was, how many hours after collection do you isolate the plasma? And it's just 30 minutes was his maximum. And we received samples overnight from different parts of the country. So
No, I think somebody's talked about a control that's different sex. I think it's okay though. You know, it's like, anything is helpful in terms of bringing in controls. And if it's someone, you know, if you can help us bring in someone who's sort of in the same position as you are, but not affected, then that's good too. You know, that works. So I don't know, Tiana, if you want to just say a word or two about what your hopes are for the kind of, what are you hoping to do with qualitative research?
Yeah, so on the qualitative side, that would be the big picture goal is to give voice to everybody who's having these experiences. And so how does the qualitative side of listen differ from the quantitative side of listen? So one aspect would be the stories that many of you have already shared on the platform that you wrote in detail about your experiences. Just know that we are reading through those and we do care. And going forward, if the IRB, the regulatory body here to approve research, approves the qualitative protocols that we have in place, we're hoping to interview some of you and just sit down with you, talk to you for an hour or so, and really hear about your experience in way more depth than what can be captured through all the data that you've already given us.
That's great. Imagine we have a medical student who's sort of that tuned into thinking about the patient voice and trying to do that. I mean, we're really fortunate to have Tiana working with us and interested in this, and she wants to go into neurology. So she has particular interest in some of the neurologic issues that, oh, there you go, Lindsay. She's particularly interested in some of the neurologic issues in trying to figure out if we can help. And I thought, like, wouldn't that be amazing if a medical student could help solve some of this stuff? That would be amazing. Amy had a nice comment about, listen, I would really appreciate it, but let me just say, we approach this with humility. Like, we know we don't do everything right. We may actually stick our foot in our mouth or, you know, misstep or somehow make things more difficult too. Like, we're just always looking for feedback, and, you know, we're going to do the best we can. We're committed. We want to help. We want to work together, and we want to try, you know, we want to figure out whether we can all solve this in a way that can relieve suffering and turn this around, let people get back to their lives. So that's the goal. And so, you know, and when these other studies, I have sympathy for me. I think I'm glad anyone's doing research. And, you know, even when you encounter somebody doing research and something happens that's not exactly the way you want, like, at least we should applaud that they're doing something, right? Because there's a lot of places that aren't engaging and doing things too. So, you know, I mean, I hope that they're all wanting to listen carefully about how they can improve too. I think everyone in the research community, we need to move away from this hierarchical idea in you as subjects either comply or don't comply, but how do we work together and stream the ideas? And the last thing I'm going to say again is ideas about how we can encourage people to fill out surveys, what frequency of surveys, how we can get people at least to take the opportunity to consider connecting their records. You know, again, I'm cognizant of some people may just not want to do it, but for people who are willing to do it, how can we encourage them to say this is for the good of the study, and it will help a lot if they do that? Like your ideas about how we can think about reaching folks and then improving the diversity of the study. And then also just spreading the word about the study, because ultimately the more people we have, the more we can learn together. So I think these are some of the central messages we want to say. And part of the reason we just wanted to have this meeting, we hadn't met since March. And we're recording this so other people can listen. We want to tell people we're not standing still. We're trying to move forward. By the way, we're strengthening our team. Lindsay and Tiana, I mean, that's, you know, we're bringing in strength, and we're going to try to bring in more. Kiko will be back at future meetings, and, you know, she's not only doing good science, but she's also being a great ambassador for the importance of this kind of research. She lends a lot of credibility to the idea that, you know, what you guys are experiencing is real. We know it's real, but I'm just saying it's like you're constantly colliding with people who are not as in tune with what people are experiencing, or writing things and even weaponizing studies in ways that, you know, undermines the validity of what you're experiencing. So, you know, I think that's part of our job, is not only do the research, but to have people have respect for, you know, the experience of what you're going through. And that goes, you know, long COVID, vaccine injury, people have both. I mean, you know, this, and it goes, by the way, that there are lots of other people who we believe are suffering from similar kinds of syndromes from other conditions or other vaccines. And, you know, what we're hoping is that this helps crack the case to help them too. Like, you know, people are not only dealing with the illness, but they're having to deal with a lot of people who are not even sure about the reality of it. And so that's part of what we have to, you know, face as we move forward. So anyway, we're at the end. I wanted to thank you all for your participation. We'll go through the chat and the questions to see what we might have missed and what we can, you know, somehow get back to you. We'll work with Talia and the Kindred team to try to get this stuff back to you. But just want to express deep appreciation for your participation in this town hall, but even more so in the Listen Study, and for your belief that together we can actually move things forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And just one thing before we sign off, a reminder that on next Tuesday, let me fact check myself. We have the Kindred Cafe with Wes Eli. So if you haven't already registered, please do that as soon as you can, if you're able to make it. And that's going to be from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. ET. So look forward
And
to
Wes
seeing
is
you.
amazing. He's just incredible. Just an extraordinary individual, wise, smart, really, really amazing. Great. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much.
Mhm.